All right, we are in June, June 10th. It is hot, I was gonna say hot and humid, and I don't know what happened here in California. But we are going to be starting a 3-week series now with Mama G and Samantha B, divulging a little bit about our lives. And today we're going to be talking about our personal journeys with food. And I think that you're going to find Samantha B's um, little story here quite tantalizing. Is that the word? All right, let's go.
Hello, this is Samantha B, and this is Fitness and Nutrition 101. Sitting right around June 10th, we've got a 3-week continuation, or a 3-week, what do we call it, series with Mama G here on Nutrition and Fitness 101 call. So hopefully it helps kind of build your own confidence in what you're doing right now, and to kind of see about the journey that it's taken us to get here, and to know that it's okay to have your own journey. And the reason that making mistakes and getting educated and understanding this process is really important. And it didn't just happen like this for Samantha B. It didn't just happen like this for Mama G. But as we grow and as we learn and as we continue to practice healthy behavior, our health only becomes better, and our ability to work with others to share this program only becomes better. Okay, so this is Samantha B's food journey. So I guess I should kick that out for those of you guys that don't know. I grew up in New England, in the beautiful state of Maine, in a small town, Mexico, Maine. So I grew up with an older sister and both of my parents who are still married today, and we lived very well. I can remember very vividly my dad always making dinner. My mom worked out of town. Both of my parents worked in the paper mill industry. My dad was an electrician in the local mill in my hometown, and my mom was an industrial hygienist, turned into safety manager, turned into whatever, for a neighboring paper company that was about 30 to 40 miles away. So my mom got us ready for school while we went to school. I had a babysitter for a while, and then my dad was the one that picked us up and made sure that we kind of had like a diet of, you know, a starch, protein, and then a veggie. And that was pretty consistent growing up. For breakfast, it was all about trying to like get us going. So I can remember definitely having some sugary stuff. I can really remember having these like cinnamon toast crunch bars that were like, it was like a bar like this, and it actually had like dry milk in between. And so I had those. I can remember when I was younger, and you can see that my food history and journey definitely went from caring to not caring to really caring, and so on and so forth. So, but I can't remember being all that much of a picky eater. I remember that I didn't like tomatoes. I can remember that I loved eating vegetables. My grandfather had a farm, huge. When I was growing up, he had a huge garden up on his hill that I used to love, admired the stuff that he grew. I don't remember getting too much education about food, but I remember like knowing like seasonal foods from where I grew up, because we didn't have as much availability as we do here in SoCal. So I remember apples being in season. I remember having certain like pickled this and different things during the holidays because it was in season. And so that's very vivid to me. So even from a very young age, I started sports, and I was very active. I don't necessarily remember being told by coaches or told by my parents or told by other parents like how important nutrition was at that time. I don't even necessarily remember like water being encouraged all that much. Now it could have been, I just don't necessarily remember it. But I can make a distinct change when I went to a gymnastics camp, and I can remember a lot of girls talking about my body. I grew up with a fair amount of muscle mass. I had a six-pack when I was really young, but I was really active, and I was doing a bunch of gymnastics, so handstands and pull-ups and toes to bar and glide kips and whatever. And so I had a really lean physique because young and always moving. But I can remember girls talking about my body. And I can remember at that time I liked it. I liked the attention that I was getting. People wanted to borrow my clothes. They kind of wanted to like look like me. And they would mention my 6-pack or my 8-pack. And I remember feeling really good about that. And I was young at the time. And I remember some of the older girls would do it. And that was, to me, that attention felt good. So as I continued in sports, my appearance was important. I remember wanting to be the best, always working really hard, and not being the best was never really an option. I really wanted to be good. I remember there was a time in gymnastics where there was like a moment, it was like, hey, listen, you're getting pretty beat up and you're not that good. And it was like, whew, you know, like it almost like kind of took the pressure off a little bit, but I was really good at field hockey at the time. And so I just focused my attention and I said, hey, I want to be good at something. I'm going to go to that. So I remember, you know, gymnastics was a kind of crazy time because the idea behind gymnastics was to be able to manipulate your own body weight, which I could do very well because, again, I had like a lot of muscle mass, but I definitely wasn't trying to gain any weight. I remember, you know, always wearing crop tops and leotards and definitely not wanting to be the bigger one. I definitely wanted to be smaller, and I wanted that attention of being smaller and something to look at and look good at. And so that I didn't realize at the time how much that was molding how much my relationship with food was. So by the time I get into middle school and it turned into, you know, the same as a lot of other kids, there was bullies and boys. And the bullies were thin and they were popular and they had really nice clothes. And then we had the boys that were attracted to those people. So it was really natural that I wanted to be very thin, and I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be thin, and I wanted to, you know, I wanted people to notice. And I definitely, now where I am in my life, I can say that, but I wouldn't have admitted that a few years ago, I'm pretty sure. So having that attention about my body and having attention about definitely my performance, I really did well with positive reinforcement when it came to my performance. But in this whole time, in this whole journey, food was never looked at to improve anything. It wasn't to improve my appearance. It wasn't to improve my performance. It wasn't to improve my quality of life or the way I felt. It was always about taking food away. The less amount of food that I could have was always going to be better because I always associated that with being thinner. And being thinner was always going to be, I guess, popular, successful, getting more attention in a good way. And I really had a hard time with that. Now, during my transition from middle school to high school, I went through 2 pretty big surgeries. I lost a lot of weight during that time. I was already very thin, but my frame was about the same, about 5'4". And I struggled with amenorrhea, so I lost my period pretty early on. I went onto the depot to make sure that it stayed away. So I was already like hormonally very challenged. And so I had these 2 big surgeries and lost a lot of weight and never really gained that mass back from my first surgery into my second one. And so, I mean, I was really small. I mean, just over 100 pounds for a long time. And I was still really successful in sports, but I really can remember not eating anything. I can remember getting introduced. I remember my mom realizing how tired I was all the time because I didn't eat. And I get introduced to an energy drink, and to have that caffeine and that stimulation gave me more energy. That was it for me. Then I was like, oh, all I need to do is not eat and take caffeine, and caffeine will be enough to fuel at that point, it wasn't a workout, it was sports. And I'll be able to get the attention that I want from sports and the success that I want from sports. But food was never the option unless I was getting cramps. And then I definitely remember having like a banana. I remember that association really early on. So getting through high school was pretty rough when it came to nutrition. I was so obsessed with being thin that I honestly didn't, I was obsessed with being thin. I was obsessed with being athletic and being thin was going to be a repercussion of that in a good way. And so I couldn't do one without the other. And so it fit me. And so I also liked the attention that both of those brought me. So moving into college, and I had mentioned this before, that I was always looking to be the best one. And it was like, if I wasn't the best one, then I was gonna, not that I switched sports very often, but I remember the big transition from gymnastics into field hockey, and then skiing. I was very good, and then there was a point where it was like, okay, number one, you're losing your mojo and points and so on and so forth, and I struggled with that too, because my weight wasn't helping, and because you want to be able to hold a lot of mass into your lower body during ski season, but then again, I struggled with the fact that I wanted to be thin. So anyway, so it didn't work. I was a great skier, but I probably had a lot more potential that I lost out on if I would have known and lived the lifestyle that I live now. But so moving into college, my ski career had just finished. My field hockey career was still fine. I was the best one where I grew up, but now I was moving into collegiate sports. And again, I'm from a really small town, Mexico, Maine. And so moving into a college team, I knew it was going to be a lot more challenging. So I trained in my butt off that summer. I can remember doing the whole training plan and then showing up and being in really good shape. And I remember at that point that my coach made it a point to talk about food a little bit, to talk about, but I guess I kind of associated it more with bonding. That we were going to go and we were going to eat together as a team, and we were going to go to this as a team and eat, and we were going to get money when we went to different colleges, whatever, to play, and that was money so that we could eat and have a bonding experience. In my head at the time, that's what I was thinking, because a lot of times we would pocket the money and save it for later or whatever, because you were allowed to do whatever you wanted if you wanted to bring your own food from wherever you were getting it. But so in that transition, I remember food being brought up, but it wasn't brought up in the way of like, okay, we need recovery in 30 minutes. We need a meal 45 minutes after that. We need to make sure that we eat before that. That stuff was never really mentioned. And if it was, it definitely wasn't something that it wasn't like thrown in my face for me to really focus on it. So I think that at that point, I mean, I was ignorant to the fact that could have helped me. I suffered from a lot of injuries, and I'll talk about that in the continuation call. But, I still, in college, I had my first real period, I think, then. And so my body was breaking down. It had no nutrition at all. It was overactive for sure. And just a lot of terrible, crappy things that in my head, I'm thinking that I was doing everything right, because in my head, thin was the successful winning situation, and I was thin. And then at that point, when my college career ended, I really was struggling with not being an athlete, because it ended on kind of a poor note because of injuries that I had. When I moved into my career, I remember moving out, and I moved to California, and I worked at a strength and conditioning company. And I can remember starting to talk about food more often. I started remembering hearing more people say, like, okay, what did you have to eat prior to? And then things started to shift. And so this environment that I left was based on performance in sports, but I was still being kind of influenced by like the boys and bullies type of thing, that type of attitude of like, I was definitely obsessed with field hockey at this point, but I didn't do everything that I could have nutritionally by all means that at this point, I think would have made the world of a difference for my body and my performance. But you get what you get in that moment. Looking back on it, when I was sitting in nutrition class, studying for a different class, I'm like, man, like I was there. I could have been ready, but at that point I wasn't ready. And that's a big thing to understand. And especially in this Mama G's lifestyle and Samantha B's lifestyle and whatever your name is, your lifestyle, is that anyone can tell you anything. And if the end point in your head is skinny and thin, and that's when I'm going to be happy and confident and all these great things, then you'll do whatever it takes to get there. for a short while. But until the bigger thing happens, where you actually break down the walls of what it is that you really need to be successful, then it's a crapshoot, and you're not ready to hear it. You got to be ready to hear it. You got to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I left my college career behind. I was devastated because I was so injured leaving, but I was coming into the sports performance company, and I was really excited about it. At this time, I started being introduced to a whole bunch of different stuff. I was going from the state of Maine to the state of California, and now there was all kinds of things at my disposal, and people trying to sell me stuff and try to get me onto the bandwagon. And man, did I try everything at this point. So moving to California, I was already pretty body conscious, but I was coming out of my end of my college career, kind of broken in my body. I had definitely gained a little bit more weight because I wasn't able to play as well towards the end of my season because I was broken. And I decided to start doing all kinds of different things. So I started with, I remember eating some like healthy food, but a lot of it, and I wasn't showing much difference in my composition, but I was definitely starting to perform a little bit better. My training also started to improve because I was training and getting certified for my CSCS, so I was learning a lot more about my body. I was introducing myself to hip mobility and better strength training technique, and I was really learning a ton from these people on a physical component. And it was kind of around this time that I was feeling really good in the gym, and I was doing well at my job, and I wanted to take it to the next level. So what would be the next level? I was going to become vegetarian. I read the book Skinny Bitch, and if you've ever read it, she mind warped me big time, but I allowed it to happen. I was a recent college grad. I knew how to look at sources and check for resources, and I never did. I mean, I read the book and I was completely brainwashed, and I thought that dairy would kill me. I would be fat if I ate it. I thought that if I ate animal products, that was going to be my nemesis. And so I did what any young, broke, just graduated college student would do, and that is become vegetarian and be completely iron deficient and find myself in a state of malnutrition. I can remember very vividly at this point that I was very calorie restricted. I didn't eat very much at all, ever. And my energy level was so low. And I remember just living off caffeine at this point. And I can remember days, I worked 6 days a week. I would party on Saturday night, and then on Sunday, I would not be able to move. I remember I would lay in bed all day and I would binge. I would binge on pizza, on, I'm trying to think, footlong subs from Subway, because they were $5 footlongs at that point. I can remember just at that point, just not having any nutrition or any idea what I was doing. Remember I said I was in nutrition classes, so I passed the class, so I had a little bit of education on it, but nothing else was obviously working at this point. So I can remember my mom coming up to visit me, and I was living with a couple of friends in a house, and I remember I was like, she wasn't going to stay with me because we had already had a few girls living there, and she had gotten a hotel. And I remember bringing her in, and I was like, okay, I'm so excited to show her my life, and whatever. I was doing it on my own. I never asked her for any help. And then I remember her opening up my refrigerator, and she was like, so where's all your food? I was like, that's it. And then she opened my one cabinet, and I was like, that shelf right there is mine. And she was like, oh my gosh, like, what happened? What are you doing? And I was like, nothing, I'm good. At this time, I played around, after being vegetarian for a while, like really hitting a wall. I played around with all kinds of different like vitamin companies where I was like supplementing everything and anything. And I was taking liquid vitamins with liquid vitamin energy drinks. And I can remember getting vitamin toxicity, getting really sick, not knowing that was a possibility. Was young and really ignorant and followed into a pyramid scheme. Once I was done that, I went into like a high protein diet. And I worked for a company that did a couple of like nutrition challenges that were so incredibly calorie restrictive and really, really high protein. And I can remember going back to trying to eat less, and I was getting lean again because I was training more. So I would fluctuate for sure. Like I think I would fluctuate like in a 10-pound range. That sometimes I was really thin, and then sometimes I was just fluffy. Like I never really gained like a tire around my waist or anything like that. But it wasn't like a steady, like, this is my body. It was like, and just feeling like so much ups and downs of, I'm tired and I don't know what I'm doing and I'm not feeling myself properly. But I can definitely remember being on like that high protein diet, not having a lot of hair. I had, remember wearing my hair in a bun for what seemed like, oh, I don't know, what was it? It had to have been at least a year, and then I ended up trading to get hair extensions. And I was going through like my journey, and I remember thinking like I got hair extensions because I was losing my hair because I was so undernourished. Like I was dying. I was so tired. I would take so much caffeine. I would do anything to suppress my appetite because, again, being thinner was everything. And so then as I was still in this kind of dietary intake situation. And then Mama G came into my life around this time, and I was starting to eat more carbs from kind of doing more research on my own. My company at that time took on a new nutrition challenge from somebody that was a registered dietitian. It was called the Takedown Challenge. And they had really good content. And so I started to go back to that. I remember taking out my old nutrition book and kind of rereading some segments and going through some of the processes of how you break down carbs and what carbs are used for. And then I started to add carbs into my training. Now, not tons, but some, and some made a really big difference. I started to make a lot of strength gains. And so I started to lift more than I ever have. And I remember hitting some bigger numbers, like a 135 bench and a 200-pound squat, and I was pulling like 225 pound deadlift, which now are numbers that I laugh at for myself, not for other people. But now, I mean, I'm so much stronger than that. But at that point, I remember that, oh, okay, and I was really seeing a correlation with food. Now, at that point, it was when I started to meet Gina. I remember Gina, I used to drink a gallon of water with Crystal Light Pack in it. And Gina would say, yeah, like, let's try to get rid of that. Like, that's that non-nutritive sweetener in there, blah, blah, blah. And I remember at first it was a really tough thing to quit for me because I needed the water because I was starving. I needed to drink a ton of water because I didn't eat very many calories. So getting rid of that was really tough. But when I did, it was better, and I started taking some more steps. And then as like I got that little bit of nutrition education, I went to a couple different nutrition classes. I started to really start thinking about the carb thing again, and I started implementing more and more carbs. It was great, and my performance was definitely getting better. My body looked better, but then it was getting ready for my wedding. And Gina had bought me the gift of going to a registered dietitian. When I went to her was the first time that I said, okay, I'm not in charge of my diet anymore, you are. And that was probably one of the best things that I did for myself. I felt like now the trust was in somebody else, and I was so serious about it. I mean, I was getting ready for my wedding. She didn't control my output, which I definitely pushed the output as much as I could. Again, it was for a special situation, but we were able to sub things. And so it wasn't like, you know, how we have like a dairy, a fruit, and a nut, or a fat, or whatever it is for our lunch. Our snack. We could do like a 2 fats and a 1 protein and a blah, 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 blah. We could mix and match them. So I definitely would like play around with things. And at that time, like, it was important for me to prioritize alcohol in some situations. So I knew how to like have a glass of wine and it wouldn't affect my day. And it was good. I felt good. My energy level was much higher. And again, I was making strength gains. And that to me was like, oh, great. So a couple of injuries that followed that. I fell and I hurt my back really bad. And so that stunk. And that's when I realized like a couple of different things with my core, and I guess I'll go into that with my continuation, so whatever. So that's when Mama G started to talk to me about Mama G's lifestyle. And she kind of said, you know, I like what this girl's doing, but she's not incorporating enough nutrition. And I was like, you know, what do you mean? And then she started to like kind of explain to me more stuff. And so I was doing more research at that time as well, just like going back and like reading some of my old school books and going through like, oh, the process of breaking down the sugar, process of breaking down carbs is like important to understand to a certain extent when you're trying to untrain somebody that's like, you can't eat carbs, when you understand, oh, you actually, carbs are your friend and they're going to help all these things and your body's actually going to look better at the end. That was a big thing. But then the best thing and worst thing at the same time happened is I got pregnant, and I was completely and utterly lost with the changes in my body. I was going through a really hard time emotionally with some other things that were going on in my life, but my body was everything to me at that point. I had worked really hard for where it was, and I could just see it changing, and I didn't like it. I didn't think it would ever go back. I looked at pictures of myself and I thought to myself, oh my God, like I was so lean. I was so ripped. Oh my God, that person was so much better. But I can remember taking those pictures, those days of those pictures, and ripping them apart. You're not lean enough. You don't have much muscle. Your legs are this. Your upper body is this. And it all came down to, I had my daughter. God, I could almost cry a little bit. I had my daughter, and it was the best thing that ever happened. And I figured it all out. She saved my entire life because I figured out it wasn't about me being lean anymore. It wasn't about me being anything anymore except for to be around for her. And I figured out that I didn't need to be skinny for her to love me. And I didn't need to be skinny for my husband to love me either. He loved me all the way through that whole thing. My friends loved me as well. And the people around me, I didn't lose my entire business. I didn't lose money. I didn't lose anything. I only gained my self-worth, my confidence, and my future of building my strength and health, and no longer thinking about being skinny anymore. I honestly took me 31 years. I don't know how old I am. I never know how old I am. I never knew that I could be happy without being skinny. I had no clue. I wanted to get my body back. That's an understatement. But as I was getting it back, I did it in a way that was so different than I'd ever done it before. And my food was so important that I ate, and that I was able to fuel for her and fuel for myself. And when I look back at every mistake that I had in my diet, every mistake that I had, the repercussion was always my self-esteem, which was number one, my self-confidence, which was number two, and my physical disability from all of them. I always got injured. There was always a problem. There was always fatigue. There was always soreness on soreness. And I look at now the way that I understand what I need to eat, and I understand that how much I need to eat when I'm working out harder, and that when I don't, I'm not going to get fat and I'm not going to get skinny. I'm going to stay the same, which is okay. And I love myself now more than I ever have in the past, even when I was really, really skinny, even though I still look at some of my wedding pictures and I'm like, damn, girl. It's not all about the absolute physical aesthetic of your body. When you can wake up with energy, when you can go to bed when it's time to sleep, when you can sleep through the night, when you can ride in a car without back pain, when you can get up out of your chair, when you can go for a walk, when you can go for a bike ride, when you can not worry about participating in an activity if it was going to mess something up or do this or do that. When you get your life back, when you love yourself again, that's what Mama G and Samantha B are trying to convey. As much as I would love to say to everybody, you finished Mama G's lifestyle and you are living in an ideal body weight, we don't know what ideal is for you. We don't know what ideal is on a body image scale, because whether you become happy with the person that you are right now and fuel it for the love that you have for yourself and the love that you want to continue having for yourself as the future continues, then we are in a big, big dilemma of always hating our body for what it is. As I move forward into Mama G's lifestyle and I build it my family and I teach my daughter, the number one thing that I'm going to do is talk about why or what we're eating. I want to give her more education, as I want to give you more education on the reasons why I suggest she has dairy, a fruit, and a nut or fat. I want to suggest why we need non-starchy vegetables in our life and starchy carbs in our life. I need to understand why we eat protein and why animal sources versus vegetable sources are different, but consuming more of a variety of whatever. I need her and I need you. I need everyone to understand that this is all part of being in your lifestyle. Now, whatever your journey happened to be, and with bouts of starvation and anorexia and treating yourself like you don't deserve to feel good, or call it ignorance. Because a lot of times when I look back, I call it ignorance, that I didn't know any better. I thought by getting skinny, my life would be better. But the wake-up call is here. Our entire nation is in a pandemic that our future generation is not to outlive. My daughter is not supposed to outlive me. And that's a load of crap. Not if I have anything to say about it. It starts with spreading the knowledge. It starts with showing. It starts with modeling right now. And we might be getting a little picky right now when we're almost 2 years old, but you show them real food. You show them how you eat. You don't demonize food. You don't demonize yourself. Food is your fuel. It's not your reward. It's not your constant reminder of how terrible you look in a bikini. It is your fuel, and that's it. So I don't really like that. And you know what? I'm not really into that. Tough. Put your big girl, big boy pants on, and let's start creating a journey from this foot forward with one that's your own, that's supported by education, that's supported by nutrition, and that's supported by what we have built and given you as a platform from something that has been created from the beginning of time. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Samantha B, and you are better for the rest.
Pretty much, I have nothing to say but awesome job, Samantha B. Honest to God. So proud of that effort. Now let's see if I can shut this stupid thing off. Okay. All right. Coming on, Mama G. So thank you, Samantha B, for sharing your vulnerability there. I think it was critically important. Samantha B and I have been buddies for a good 5 years now, and I never heard it condensed like that. And I think it's really critical to understand that each one of us has so many facets that put us in the situation that we're in today. And so let's get on Mama G's journey. Samantha B and I sit 23 years apart in age, which means we grew up in completely different generations. I grew up in a home with parents that were teenagers in depression, completely different kind of food mentality. And I grew up in a Mediterranean home. My parents were Italian. My dad, an immigrant from Italy. I would be going to visit his hometown in a couple weeks. And the fact is that we ate like they do in Europe. My dad had a garden, just like Samantha B's grandpa. Every night for dinner was pasta, macaroni with a vegetable. Always. There was always a salad. There was always another vegetable, and there was always some kind of lean protein item there. And that's the way it was. And weekends and Sundays were family dinners where everybody was brought around the kitchen table, and we enjoyed food and fellowship. And I have beautiful, beautiful memories of our family meals together. And we ate all of our family meals together. We weren't exposed to social media like people are today. We couldn't have a flip of your iPhone and check out what so-and-so's eating or what so-and-so's telling you that is the best food or the best diet or the best way to do this, that, or the other thing. We had the library and we had magazines. Prevention Magazine had just come out when I was a teenager. It was kind of the leading thing out there. We, you know, I don't know about you guys, but back in the day, there was a little basket in the bathroom and there sat all the magazines, and you pull out the old magazine, and I remember pulling out Prevention Magazine and reading about eating healthy foods and exercise. We actually had one of the very first Trader Joe's in our town near the LA airport, and my dad used to go there and come home with dried fruit and nuts. My dad went to the YMCA every single day of his life. He played handball on a regular basis. I know he worked a little bit in the weight room, did some cardiovascular exercise. I know he really enjoyed going in the sauna and the steam room. And that was something that I grew up with, exercise being part of our lives. My mother was very active. She bowled practically every single weekday of the week. And that was just part of our lifestyle. And eating beautiful, wholesome foods was part of our lifestyle until we hit into the 70s, when now we had big corporations bringing in food. Well, we actually saw it back in the 50s when the women went into the workplace and we needed to make things easier for them, and the big food companies started to do more canning of foods. And we actually used a lot of canned foods back in World War II through the Korean War, the Vietnam War. And so there were a lot of canned foods. We now started to see frozen TV dinners, more frozen foods, more convenience foods, because now more women in the workplace, not available to be cooking meals, all the meals for the family. And so things got a little bit easier for those people when they went shopping and provided food for the families. Eating out, though, was a luxury back in the day. So my mom used coupons. Coupons were a big thing back in the day, double and triple coupons. And so we would get things in the house that were special treats because of those coupons. So we might see some ding-dongs one day, or we might see some sody pop or something special like that. And they were exactly that. They were treats. And we had them on occasion, and we kind of coveted them. We grew up in a middle income family. We needed nothing, but we didn't have a lot of excess, because again, as parents who grew up in the Depression, they were very frugal and tight with their money, and they believed in not wasting anything. So, you know, I might get a article of clothing, a pair of jeans or something like that, but my parents knew how much I loved beef jerky and M&Ms, and I would get a big jar of beef jerky, and I would get a big bag of M&Ms, and I would covet them. I would dole out 3 or 4 M&Ms a day because I wanted to make them last, because they were special and it was a treat. I'd have maybe one beef jerky every couple of days because it was special. I wanted them to last. Nowadays, these highly processed convenient foods are very inexpensive and available on every single corner. And unfortunately, as Samantha B. talked about, the pandemic, the obesity pandemic that has now taken over the entire world. All right. I was just in Israel. I saw the obesity pandemic there. I was on the beach in San Clemente this weekend, saw the obesity pandemic there. I'll be traveling to Europe in a couple weeks. Guarantee I'm going to see it there. But the point being is, when I was a child, those type of things were special treats and completely acceptable. But for the most part, we were eating beautiful, nutritious, and delicious foods. I never remember getting in trouble for not eating foods. We were provided with a huge variety of food from day to day to day. My mom always cooked something different. She never thought of herself as a good cook. She was a fine cook. Everything she always made was delicious. It wasn't gourmet or fancy. But we always ate deliciously, and only one time in my life do I ever remember having string beans. Imagine that. I've got string beans in my dinner tonight, and I didn't want them for whatever reason. When I tucked them in a napkin, and then I went to the bathroom and threw them in the trash can, and lo and behold, Mom found those string beans. But that was the end of that. We hear often with people will say they'll make the kids sit there until they eat them, or you're not going to get dinner again, or you can't go to bed, or you're going to go to bed without supper if you don't eat your string beans, or whatever that is. It's really important that we don't use food as a punishment, and we don't use food as a reward. And as Samantha B said, it's really important that we teach the value of nutrition, why we eat certain ways. And we have to start with our children, because as Samantha B also said, it's important to understand that it is predicted that the children of this generation today will live shorter lives than their parents are. And that is completely unacceptable. And that is because of our role modeling this behavior for these people. So let's continue to talk about this subject. I want you to really hear me when I talk about my situation. So I never thought too much about anything. My oldest sister, Lou, was 16 years older than me. She was a second mother, a best friend to me. She was my everything. And I will tell you, from the moment I understood what a diet was, my sister was on a diet. She was born in 1950. She had done the grapefruit diet, and she had done the bacon diet, and every single, the cabbage soup diet, and then this diet, and that. My sister was on a diet her entire 46 years that she lived on this planet. And it was unfortunate, because what happened to her, it's supposed to be about Mama G, but I'm going on. What happened to her as time went on, and we saw all of these highly processed foods, lots of saccharine and non-nutritive sweeteners came into play. And so there were diet sodas, and then you had all of these sugary, sweet foods that now we can substitute in with saccharin and these chemicals. And she ate a lot of them. And everything was about calorie counting, and everything was about deprivation. And she exercised religiously. And ultimately, she ended up succumbing to breast cancer. And who knows if one of the reasons that occurred in her gene pool, let us say, and that those genes were turned on, was because of the seriously deficient foods that she was eating at that time. So that was my expectation in terms of diets in my life. When I was a young gal, I wanted to be Samantha B. Just going to tell you that right now. I wanted to be super fit. I wanted to be an athlete. In the early 70s, it really wasn't an option in my little community. I would have loved to be on an organized sports team. We used to play ball in the street and all of those things, but there weren't those opportunities for me. But my sister Lou, who was that much older than me, had children when I was little bitty. So I grew up watching them, and they joined the swim team, and she encouraged me to join the swim team. I was in 9th grade. It was my last year of junior high school. I was terrible. But I now had a sense of community, and I now was part of a team, and it was awesome. And that allowed me to transition into being on the swim team in high school. And I'm talking about this for a reason, because I was working out on a regular basis. And so, while I wasn't skinny, I wasn't heavy by any stretch. I could have been thinner. It was about that time that we saw a lot of influence from magazines and TV, and we started to see what skinny could look like. And the runway models were super skinny. And as Samantha B said, she had dealt with amenorrhea, which is when you don't have a period. And a lot of those things occur because of lack of calories, and our body then starts to shut down because the hormones aren't working appropriately. So in my experience, I was on the swim team, and everything was normal. And then I went to New York with my Uncle Jimmy for 2 weeks. And during that time, I didn't exercise. It was the summer going into 11th grade, 10th grade maybe. That was the beginning of high school. And we visited all of our Italian relatives. And every day, maybe even more than once a day, we'd go to a new relative's house. And how do you show love? You bring out the food. And so I had never been exposed to so much food, and food that was highly caloric. They were cookies and pasta meals that were covered in cheese and sausage and all kinds of wonderful Italian food, but there was no regulation. And guess what? There was no exercise at that point for me. And 2 weeks later, I came home from that trip and my pants were tight. And I'd never experienced that before. And I thought I need to go on a diet. Now, I'm not sure exactly what diet I tried to do, but I'm sure that diet involved not eating or reducing my food intake. And I remember starting back at school and swim team practices starting. And I remember the first week and trying to eat less food, being on a diet. And I was starving. And there was not a chance that I was going to be able to stay on that diet. And ultimately, I don't even know what happened because naturally I was back to my normal routine, naturally started exercising on a daily basis because I was on the swim team. I was back at home being fed that Mediterranean diet, and eventually my weight came back to where it needed to be. And that's where I started 10th grade. Now, let's fast forward through 10th, 11th grade. Focused on school, focused on my academics, focused on being the swim team. By the way, back then they used to call me Mama Regina because I was the one that would always bring food to bring all of the swimmers around the pool deck. And it's interesting to see that transition now in my life. But now we come to senior year of high school, and this is where my disordered eating began. So the girls swam in the fall, and all was great. I also fell in lust with a younger man named Jeff, and I was head over heels with him. And, when you have these transitions in your life, especially as a young person, I could have cared less about food, and I started losing weight, right? On the swim team, probably working out harder than I ever had because I actually was getting better at being a swimmer after 3 years of being in the pool. And I started to notice that I was thinner, and I really liked it. And then what happened was swimming ended, fall semester ended, swimming ended. I knew that exercise was important. We started to go to the gym. We were lifting some weights. We were doing some cardio activity at the local gym that I belonged to. I think it was called Family Fitness back in the day, not 24-hour fitness. And my dad went on a diet. Now, I don't know why he went on a diet. I was probably 15 years of age. My dad was 45 years older than me. I was 45 when I was born, 45, 55, 60. So he was 60 years of age. It's kind of that age where we have to start eating less if we're not, lifting weights and trying to maintain or gain muscle mass. Our metabolism slows down. So he probably started to see from his very slim athletic body, he probably started to see maybe a little bit of a pudge in his waistline. And he probably didn't like it. And so I'm thinking that he had his little prevention magazine, and in that prevention magazine probably talked about this diet. Now, I remember this diet. He had the book. I remember seeing a copy on the kitchen counter. It was called the Scarsdale Diet. And the Scarsdale diet was very, very regimented and very low in calories. I think that the calorie output for this diet was about 1,000 calories. You ate like a piece of toast for breakfast and a half a grapefruit. For lunch, you could have some lunch meat. You might get a piece of cheese. It was very restrictive, very limiting, and it was very, very easy to do. And once you kind of got it in your head and you saw the results because you were starving to death and you're basically eating what we would call a high protein diet at that point in time, the weight came out dramatically. Add in that I was, still working out probably more diligently than ever, and then in lust with this young man. And little old Mama G, who sits at $120 right now at 56 years of age and more muscle than I've ever had, was sitting at 98 pounds soaking wet at 5'2". And I thought I looked wonderful. I always call it my period of time where I was borderline anorexic, and we didn't know what anorexia was back then. I used food. I controlled my food intake. Swim team ended. The relationship ended. And the weekends were about going out and hanging with friends and drinking a little beer and eating bags of Cheetos. And then during the week, being highly restrictive of my food. And the scale 100% dictated my life at that time. Now, I will tell you that when we looked at people with disordered eating, there's a lot of things that allow us to diagnose them as such. So I always say I was kind of a borderline because I really like the control factor, that I can control my weight with my food, which is not really necessarily the whole picture for an anorexic, but I definitely was heading towards that anorexic mentality. And I'll tell you what, when I went back to school 10 years later for a high school reunion, a lot of my friends couldn't have been more thrilled. They told me that I had put some weight on and that I was no longer skin and bones. So it's interesting, our own perceptions in our heads compared to what other people are seeing. Now, end of high school, all was fine. Get a job at Swenson's ice cream parlor. And of course, you got 2,000 flavors of ice cream. Of course, over the course of the summer, you are going to taste every single ice cream. And of course, probably when the manager was away at the end of the shift, we would make fat ice cream sundaes and give absolutely no thought to the amount of calories we were consuming, the amount of whipped cream and hot fudge and caramel sauce and nuts we were putting on it. All we thought about was this was awesome, and we were with our friends, and this was great. And then comes the end of summer once again, where I couldn't close my zipper on my pants. I was 17 years old, 17 years and 4 months. I went off to a university that was 100 miles from home, and I was ready to get after this new life, starting my my college career. I couldn't have been more miserable with my weight. Now we talk about disordered eating again in the college realm, where we would make big bowls of chocolate chip cookie dough and take it down at midnight, cover that with a little bit of alcohol, get very little sleep, get zero exercise. And you can bet by the middle of the year that I was somebody who had definitely put on the freshman 15, if not more. I ended up getting mononucleosis, was sick as a dog, didn't go home. I don't know how I managed that, but I couldn't have been more unhappy. I was pretty sick and tired. And you know what I did? I went to the school library. I went to the diet section. I checked out a book on fasting. And for 10 days, I consumed nothing but water. Now, let me just tell you this. You eat no food and you consume nothing but water at the end of 10 days, you lose a lot of weight. You also lose muscle mass. And instead of doing what the diet book told me on coming off of a fast, which was adding a little bit of food every single day, the bottom line was, as soon as I brought food back into my life, I was ravenous and I went crazy. And by the time I got home that Christmas break, after our first quarter of school, I weighed more than I weighed when I was 9 months pregnant with my first daughter, which is the most I've ever weighed. And I was one unhappy camper. And I remember spending most of spring break in a big fluffy bathrobe because I didn't want anybody to see my body. For some reason, somehow, I don't know how I picked up the old big girl panties and got back after it, but I think I spent that 4 weeks home eating that Mediterranean diet that I grew up with, right? And I remember going back to college, joining a gym, adding some regular exercise into my life, and then I met my husband. And when I met my husband, I still was kind of a chunky girl, and he still loved me. But I did spend the next year or so working on treating my body more respectfully, but I guarantee you that I did it dieting. And then I changed majors, and I ended up going to culinary school. And I was back to my normal weight. In culinary school, we learned a little bit about nutrition, but we certainly learned about eating beautiful foods and using wholesome foods, not using canned or processed and highly processed foods that we are definitely starting to see in the 1980s. And then after I finished my chef's apprenticeship at the Hilton Corporation, and I had to work Christmas Day, and I was getting ready to get married, I knew that I was not going to stay in the field of food service, and that I was going to finish my bachelor's degree and moved into a nutrition program. And that was really the catapult for me to change my life. When I got my bachelor's in dietetics, my husband and I were newly married. We ended up moving to San Clemente and starting our family. And that was when the Mama G lifestyle began. When I got pregnant with my daughter, and we'll talk about this next week, I became a regular exerciser. I started to think about putting wholesome foods in my body to nourish it for my baby that I was growing. And while I'll tell you, back in the late 80s, we did not have the plethora of beautiful, wholesome foods that we have today. You'd have to go to like the granola stores or Trader Joe's to find those foods. I did my best, and through my education, I was able to transition and work with clients for almost 30 years as a fitness professional and as a group exercise instructor, and really seeing the struggle that all of my clients had with food and disordered eating and poor relationships and lack of education. And so I spent pretty much 30 plus years practicing what I preach and preaching what I practice. And today, coming together with Samantha B and Mama G and working what I call the experiment since about 2016 is when I started working the experiment with small groups of people around the country virtually, and now coming into our almost year and a half anniversary of Mama G's lifestyle with Samantha B. I'm telling you, we're killing the game. I'm telling you that there are repercussions to our behavior. We can see it when we're young, but we can also really understand it that much better when we sit where I am in the middle-age process and working with young people, working with middle-aged people, working with older folk. The repercussions to our behavior are real. And one of the things that I feel that I can say out loud to all of you out there is that Mama G Lifestyle and Samantha B's fitness plan, we guarantee you follow the game plan, your life's going to change for the better. We no longer talk about being skinny. We talk about being able to live life to its fullest. I don't care what your age is. I don't care what your scenario is. I don't care what your handicap is, what your disease is, what your ailments are, is that you have an opportunity to improve your life, improve your longevity, live a long, healthy, independent life if you consider using real wholesome food in your life. By the way, no restrictions, no demonizing. I say no restrictions in that if you're eating real wholesome foods, it's a lot of food, right? And we get you some calculated exercise, meeting you where you are, that our role modeling will be part of changing future generations. And I will tell you what, Samantha B and Mama G, we are incredibly proud to be part of this journey. And I think it was really important that we shared our own experiences to let you know that we struggle right there with you, all in our own ways, but together, right? Together. We have 40 plus years of experience as nutrition and fitness professionals. And you know what? We got it. We got the gold. We got the gold medal, and we're ready to hand it to you. But guess what? You got to be really ready. Take that baton from us. So Samantha, where are you? Samantha B, come back to me. She might be gone. I might have to call it without her.
This is Samantha B, and you are better for the rest.
And this is Mama G. You know what she always says? It's not about what you lose. It's about what you gain. Let's go get it, folks.